We've already seen that button symbols have 4 unique frames in their timeline: the up state, the over state, the down state, and the hit state. And we can use these 4 different states, actually the first 3 states, in designing our button to look differently when the user is pointing to them or when the user is clicking on the button, versus the user not pointing to the button, which is the up state. Let me run this demonstration and we'll just look at some button designs. So I can take just regular text and turn it into a button. You always want to use static text for your buttons. And in this case, I can tell it's a button because when I point to it, I get the little hand here. And when I click on it, nothing else happens. The button appearance is static between the up, over, and down states. Here's another play button that when I point to it, it goes from a dark red to a brighter red. So that brighter red is simply the same text with a brighter color. And when I click on it, it expands a little bit. Okay. And all I did there is change the size in the down state. This one has an animation in the over state that I pulled from the motion editor presets. And if I click on it, I go back to just static text, but with a glow, a green glow to it. And then this one is text with a rectangle. And I tried to do a little 3D appearance. I'll show you how I built this here a little bit later in this video. And so when I point to it, that background color turns from gray to blue. And if I click on it, I get sort of a recessed appearance to the button. Here's a rounded rectangle for a button that simply changes colors when I point to it and when I click on it. Here's more of a 3D look. And all I did here was use some gradients. Again, changing colors when I point to it. And when I click on it, it gets that recessed look. And I'll show you how this was built as well. We can also use icons or graphics for our buttons. So if I wanted to have a button maybe that would bring up an email form, point to it, down, back to the over state, and up state. Here's another animated button. And when I point to it, the little flame at the end is animated. Click on it, just get a different graphic for that down state. We can also use images. So here's a thumbnail image, and when I point to it, I get a red border. If I click on it, I get sort of a yellow tint to it. This one I did a little bit differently in that I get a drop shadow. And I also created what we would refer to as tooltips, where some text is telling what this button would do, or maybe describing the image, in this case, of the button, which is the Grand Canyon. So on the overstate, I'm added in that tooltip. And when I click on it for the downstate, I added a red glow. We're going to look at doing some navigational applications, and we'll want to be able to move from frame to frame, like turning pages in a book. So we'll want some previous and next buttons. Here's just some triangles that change colors when I point to them or click on them. Same thing, here's just a pencil I designed, point to it. So on the overstate, changes color, downstate, changes color again. Same thing with this hand, I get a little glow on the overstate, downstate, turns blue. And then finally here's some planes. Turns a bit more of a navy blue when I point to it, and then a brighter blue when I click on it. Let me show you another application with some different buttons. So here's an application with a map of the Middle East, and each country is a button. And here, rather than clicking on it, I'm using a roll over event of the mouse event class. And so on the over state as well as the down state, it simply is turning it yellow. The up state goes back to this light green. And so any country that I point to is going to show the name of that country. So these were simply graphics that were created in Flash. And then made each country a button. In fact, just to demonstrate that, I'm going to go in and show you the button here for Iran. Double click on it. So in the upstate it's green, and then the overstate and downstate are the same frame as well as the hit, where it simply is yellow. And each country is similar to that. Okay, so let's go back to our button design. I'll show you how I created a couple of these. This one here, if we go in, it's just simply text on the upstate. I have nothing over, down, or hit. It will still use the area of the text as my default hit. This one is just simply text for the upstate. On the downstate, I created a keyframe, changed the color text a little bit brighter color. On the downstate, create another keyframe, and I used the free transform tool and just simply enlarged the word play. And then the hit state is again just the text. This third play button, again just the text for the upstate. On the overstate, I made this text a movie clip, and then I opened the motion presets, and I applied a spiral 3D effect to this movie clip. So I have a movie clip on the overstate frame of my button. So a movie clip inside of a button. This is also a movie clip, it's just static text. So no preset applied to it, but I did go into the properties for that text and added a glow filter. And then finally my hit state, I added a rectangle to expand the hit area a little beyond the text that was there. On the fourth play button, let me zoom in so you can see this a little bit better. In the timeline for this button, I separated the text onto a separate layer called caption. You can see I can hide that. And one of the advantages of doing that is it's the same text on all three frames. So if I wanted to change this and make a duplicate button, maybe that said stop, is I don't have to change on the F frame, and it's going to reflect that on the over and down frames as well. Let's focus in though on the rectangle that's underneath of that, and I simply drew a rectangle. I made the stroke I think 3 pixels wide, and then I selected just the top and the left stroke and changed those to a bit lighter color, which gives it this 3D look. I created a keyframe on the overstate, changed the fill color, and then on the downstate I simply took the rectangle and I flipped it horizontally and flipped it vertically, which gives it now this recessed look. And then my hit state basically is the same as the downstate. So there is the overstate, and when I would click on it, it gets that recessed look. And that's going to happen pretty quickly, which really gives it that animation effect. With this button, roll the dice, I simply have a rounded rectangle. I change the color of it in the overstate and the downstate, and the hit state is the same as the upstate. This one's a little bit fancier, a 3D appearance. Let me just double click on it and show you how I created this. And I'm going to build this sort of from the ground up. So my background is 2 rounded rectangles. I used a gradient fill, a linear gradient fill on the outer one, and then a green fill on the inner one. I can just move that away. You can see how it just overlaps the first one. And then on the overstate, I simply made it a brighter color. And on the downstate, I changed the gradient. I flipped the gradient on the outer one to give it again a little more recessed look. Then I added text. And I started with the text being white on the up frame. And then as the button gets brighter, I made the text black. And then my third layer here is a gradient overlay. Let me turn these others off so you can see this. There's my gradient overlay. It's a rounded rectangle going from white to black. The same on the overstate. And then on the downstate, I've basically flipped it. And so the effect is up, over, down. It's going to give you that animation effect of pushing in. And then there's our hit area. Nice thing about this, again, that I can create duplicates of it, come in, and all I have to do is change the text, and I can create a whole set of buttons for a project. Here's the icon of an envelope. Double click on it. This was actually a wingding character that I brought in as text and then broke it apart to create it, to make it an image, and simply came in, filled it with white. On the overstate, filled it with yellow. Downstate, filled it with green. The bomb, again, was a wingdings character that I used, and I'm going to hide this top layer for now. So all I did was in the overstate was I took the part of the image that was the flame and I turned that into a movie clip. And that movie clip is animated. I simply used a little classic tween to rotate it. Gives it sort of that little sparkle effect because some of the flames are longer than others. Then on the downstate, I added a graphic behind it. In my hit state, I wanted the square area to be the area that interacts with the user, so I just drew a rectangle as my hit area, and I left the icon in there just so I could draw around it a little bit easier. Here was my first image. So it's a bitmap that I imported. Simply right-clicked on it and made it into a button. Upstate, overstate, I added a red border to it. Downstate, I filled that with a semi-transparent yellow, and the hit is simply the image. So upstate. Overstate, I made this into a movie clip, so it's again a movie clip inside of a button, and that way I could add the drop shadow through the properties using the filters. And then I drew in a rectangle, a white rectangle, placed the text Grand Canyon, added a little triangle at the top of it to point to it, and so on the overstate, when the user points to it, it's going to show the word Grand Canyon and tell them what this image is. And the idea behind this, I would probably click this little thumbnail and view a much larger image, and we'll see an example of that later. And on the downstate, I added a glow filter. And the hit state is simply the image. Same thing on our previous and next navigational buttons. So for when we create a navigational project, it's going to be like flipping pages in a book, and we want buttons that will go to the previous and next frame. We might think of it as page. And so typically all you need to do is create one of these and you can just flip it. Here's simply a triangle, black in the upstate, blue, red, and the hit frame is the same as the down. And then I simply took that button and flipped it horizontally and got the next button. Same thing with the pencil. I drew the pencil and then just simply changed the colors for the up, over, down states. The hand was a wingding character that I brought in, broke it apart. I shortened the finger a little bit. I thought it was too long in the original design, and colored it slightly gray, made it into a button. So my upstate, on the overstate, I made the hand a movie clip, so again I could apply a glow filter. And on the downstate, added a tint of blue. And the airplanes, again, was a wingding character. Made it into a button. So I broke it apart first, made it into a button. The image is black, navy blue, brighter blue. And then for the hit, I added a rectangle around the area that I wanted to have interact with this particular button. So that is how you go about designing a button with the different states to make the appearance change depending on how the user is interacting with the button.